That was a point you made. But on the other hand, we've heard in the past that, and this is the effect of the kav and the tzimtzumim and so on, that the thing that animates everything, even at the lowest level, is the ha'ara, etc., of the truth. So it's like there's truth in everything.
Right.
What is the distinction between these two perspectives?
I missed something. Do it again.
You're speaking to me?
Yeah.
I'm saying here this morning, you mentioned to emphasize the gulf between AyinBase and Atzilus. That AyinBase is absolute truth, and in Atzilus, Allah, everything else, there's no element at all of absolute truth. This is understandable. On the other hand, we also say at other times, the truth comes down to the very, very lowest level. Even though it's been diminished and reduced, etc., etc. So I'm just wondering how to connect these two seemingly different perspectives.
The truth comes down in the form of ha'ara, which is not the air itself. In other words, only the functional aspect. We discussed many times what ha'ara is. Only the functional aspect of it is reflected in the lower level.
This is true even, let's say, the Yiddish neshama, which is, we're down here in a goof in this world.
That's right.
But
of course, in the neshama there are the madregas in the neshama, the higher madregas. It's oineg and rotzen, which actually is in lakus, a mamish lakus. But then there are lower cases in the neshama. There is the seichel and midas, which are also part of the neshama.
Right. So it's those lower parts that we're talking about that have only ha'ara.
Right.
Whereas Einig and Rotzein, this is a chelek elikav mal mamish.
Right.
But what is it in the Lamaila then? Atzilus itself is still not, comparable to Einig and Rotzein, that it's not,
to Chok. This we're learning right now about Atzilus. Let us conclude the presentation, then we'll see. This is exactly what we're learning about. The principle of the ha'ara is a very important thing for us to understand. It's a ha'ara reflective of a lakus. And yet it's only a ha'ara, and therefore it is not the essence thing, and it's in a totally different madriga. And the mashal for this, as we have discussed many times, is clearly identifiable like in the human being. Like we say, a human being is supposed to behave in a certain manner that is commensurate with his being human. But the behavior aspect is just a behavior aspect. It's just an action. And anyone can imitate that action. And yet, in the human being, this action is a reflection of a neshama element. And on the mutation level, it has even less. neshama quality. So we see that you can have an imitation of a correct behavior, of a human type of behavior, which is quite distant from the sense of human sense and so forth. All right, let's go in. We'll talk in the middle discussing of Atzilus, and we'll see that all the questions that come up really are discussed here.
Want something to drink? Very comfortable. You want something to drink?
Yeah, I'll have. All right. We are in the middle of page Tesvav, almost smack in the middle. I'm going to count the lines, and the line starts with the word aval. And what we are discussing here is a principle that the Alter Rebbe says that the gap between the lower worlds and Olam HaAtzilus is not comparable to the gap between Olam HaAtzilus and Olam Sof and Atzilus. Where the gap between Atzilus and Atzilus is much greater than the gap between the lower worlds and the higher world. And that explains this quite simply. I mean, simply means simple words. That Olam HaAtzilus from Olam Sof is like a Nivra. A Nivra will be created outside of a separate entity. You may move the flowers. You don't like to look at the flowers?
I love. I want to look at your face when you're doing a show.
Oh, I'm so flattered.
Thanks.
Beis beats flowers.
What?
Beis beats flowers.
All right. So the Rebbe said, as I said in simple words, Atzilus from Olam Sof is like a new creation. It does not have a comparable presence like the Olam Sof. It is completely, totally dependent on the Olam Sof, continually maintaining its being. Whereas the lower world from Atzilus, the difference between them is only, so to speak, in relative quality. It's called Chassidus. It's a special quality, special status. It's not in essence an essential difference. That they're in different categories. In the same category, this is a world and this is a world. But this world is in a much higher quality than the lower. And therefore, this gap is much less than between a Nivro and a Boy. All right. Now becoming further into this. All right, the line begins aval mekomokai, and here we be getting into something very, very fine and very subtle. And I hope you stay with me. V'af sheho'olam hayoser elyoin. Although that this superior world, the supreme world, the highest world, that's what we said, Atzilus is the highest world. The inference and significance of the highest world is that this is a world that receives directly from Olam Sof, not from another world. Not to say the Ishtalsut, directly from Olam Sof. The highest world. That this highest world, mashpia ba'olam hatachtin. In fact, this highest world is mashpia, it bestows its chayus, its koiches on the lower world. And if not for the hashpah, that the higher world supplies for the lower world, then the lower world would be nisbatl, would become not nil. Therefore, it seems that there is a similar type of a gap between the higher world, highest world, and other world, and between the Ayin Sof and the highest world. Just as the highest world, relative to the Ayin Sof, is a creation that is totally dependent, and it doesn't have a presence of its own at all. And if the hashpah should cease, then its existence ceases. The same is in the hashpah from Olam Atzilus into the lower world also. It's a constant hashpah, and this is what sustains their existence. And if not for that sustenance, they will cease to be. Therefore, this would appear to be saying that the proximity between the lower world and Atzilus is similar to the Atzilus to Ayin Sof. In both instances, it's a creation which is dependent on its creator. So the Rebbe explains. However, you have to understand, and here's where we need to be challenged. However, that which the higher world is mashpia, is bestowing unto the lower world, it is not of its own property. It is not that the higher world has the quality to create a lower world. So that's meaning of its own. Kiim rather, mechayu say it is from the chayus, from their life force. Masha mekabel mi boiroi, what he really receives from his creator, and this he transmits to the lower world. It is not of his own presence, of his own quality. V'lulei hahashpoah me'yelam ho'el yoim, and if not for the hashpah coming from the higher world, it is true that the lower world would cease to be misbatli. Aval, however, mikol mokom, yet still, lo hoyu misbatlim legamri, they would not cease to be totally. Ki'ilu lo hoyu, as if they never were. Okay. So we'll cover a couple of more steps here, and then we'll try to focus in what the Rebbe is saying. Number one, he says that the hashpah, that the higher world is providing for the lower world, is not of its own quality. It is from what it receives from Ayin Sof. You can hear me?
I'm going to be just closer.
What? Yeah, okay, fine, I guess. The hashpah is not from the world itself, it is from what they receive from Ayin, from their creator, from his creator. So here there is a lot of points that need to be clarified, and I hope that we can keep focused and sense the significance of each one of these points. This Ayin, that it is not of its own possession, its own being, it is from what it receives from its creator. Again, this is a broader statement and will need to be discussed. But just for starters, so we should have some kind of a focus. The Creator creates the highest world. There is nothing in the Creator that compels him to create the highest world. He creates it, so to speak, from scratch. He decided he's going to make a world and makes a world. The Creator does not have as a purpose to create a world. It is not the definition of the Creator to the function and the ultimate purpose and the full accomplishment of the Creator that he creates a world. None of that. It's a totally novel. This highest world also creates lower world. But we're saying this in that creation of the world is not in and of itself. It is what it receives from its creator. On the simplest level, this is still going to be discussed. On the simplest level, this means
you may have to drive.
okay.
Your eyes open.
All right. There's a concern because we have a bris in Pennsylvania, quite far tomorrow morning. The wife is very concerned.
You going to spend Shabbos there?
Huh?
Are you going to spend Shabbos there as well?
No. That's why we have to go and come back. Last night we had a pretty light night too. So together. She's very concerned that I drive with open eyes. I don't know how to drive with closed eyes. What?
You also sleep with open eyes.
Huh?
You also sleep with open eyes.
I also think about it.
Don't sleep.
All right, let's try to get into this. The hashpoah that the highest world is mashpia into the lower world is due to the fact that the highest world was created, and it has inherently in its functional purpose to be mashpia into the lower world, which means the lower world is already inherently, so to speak, recognized from the perspective of the highest world itself before it's been created. And the reason for that is because the highest world receives its hashpah from its creator. And the hashpah from its creator is given to it for the purposes of a mashpia that it should continue on further. Therefore, the impetus, the the starting point, like the Rambam says, motivation, the first point, the force behind the whole creation, is not what the higher world has on its own. It's from its perspective and from its spirit decides to create a whole world. It's not so. It's the spirit of its creator that's in him that gives it the impetus to create a whole world. So we'll leave this at that right now and continue inside.
Will this point come up later as well?
Let's see, whatever point comes up, things will ultimately be clear.
Ah, okay.
It's a guarantee.
Okay.
And this is what we say. That he's makabel, that the higher world, highest world is mashpia to the lower worlds. That is due to hashpah that he receives from his creator. And there it is like true that the olam esatachtinim are receiving from the higher world because the higher world has a quality of its creator. And this is what enables it to be mashpia to the lower worlds. And if not for the hashpah from the higher world, the lower worlds would cease to be misbattle. And therefore, there seems to be a similar type of a statement. The higher world will be misbattle if it is not continued to be supported, and the lower world will be misbattle if it is not being continued to be supported. However, it's not exactly identical. What's the difference? I will become a coin, but yes, still. When we say that the lower worlds would be misbatel, if not for the hashpah that they receive from the higher world, from the highest world. They will be misbatel, true, but yet still, loy hoyu misbatel legamet. They will not cease to be totally lihiyois, that they would be ki'ilu loy hoyu, as if there was never such a thing as the other world. Why? Why do you say that this beetle is not total? That if the hashpah would cease, then it would be like they were never there. Like we said, by the higher world itself when it receives from Ayin inside. The reason is this. Shaharei, okay, extremely subtle, and we have to follow every word. Shaharei, since that, Inyan bitulom mitzad heder hahashpah chas v'sholem, because the principle of their beetle, that they will cease to be mitzad heder hahashpah, for the fact that the hashpah is not being provided. Meyelam ha'el yoin. Chas v'sholem, you have that beetle mitzad heder hashpah chas v'sholem from Eim ha'el yoin, who shehoyim niskalalim b'Eim ha'el yoin. In other words, it is heder hashpah chas v'sholem from a higher world, which means that this was also a world, because they were initially contained in the higher world. Like we said, the higher world was created with the intent, with the provision that there would be the possibility and eventually actualization of the lower world coming from. So therefore the higher world includes the lower world, and therefore when it ceases to be mashpia, the lower world is not ceased to exist totally. It exists only in Gilui, it's not being expressed, but in essence it is still there in the higher world. Ba'arei Yodua, for it is known, that everything that is created in the lower worlds is present, incorporated in the higher world before the lower world was created. The lower world is not a creation, so to speak, out of the blue. The lower world is a creation drawing upon what is contained in the higher world. Kinoida, again we'll go through a little bit and then we'll see what is missing. Kinoida, as is known, the whole chelki datzcham, the all aspects, all subdivisions of doimim tzimeach chayim adavit. Primarily, the world is divided in these four categories of the inanimate and the plant, the growing, and the living, and the medavit and the human. All aspects of the lower world, Atzcham, the Biyah that is in Biyah and Bri Yitzir Asi in the created world, all of the various denominations and the subdivisions of that Cham that you find in the lower world, Yesh Gam Atzilus, are present also in Atzilus. K'mishak also be Chai, as it says in Chai, V'kimvur b'mokim acher, and also as is already discussed elsewhere. V'hainu, and this is the fact that we say that all aspects of the lower world are incorporated in the higher world. The principle in this is because the highest world is also an aspect of world. It also qualifies as a world. And therefore, everything that's contained in the lower world is contained in the higher world. And this line, we will come back to it and explain it. But I just want to finish one more line. And therefore, Habitul Shalahem, the beetle of the lower world, Hurak is only a fact, Shiyiyu, the Madrego Eliyahu, that if their hashpoah from a higher world is seized, so then the lower world will not be at the Madrego where they come as after the creation. They would just be at the level where they are contained in the higher world. Avalei bitul legamri, but not a total nullification. Mikol v'kol, totally that's as non-existent. All right. So these few lines that we learn are all really drawn and all really based on these words. The last words that we say. Because that the higher world is also b'chinas Olam, is also in the realm of world. these words we have to try to understand as best we can. In essence, in a very general sense, this is not new to us, but now this is really the focus of this whole discussion. That it is also in the aspect of world. What does this mean? It's a different kind of world. It's a higher world. What does it mean? It's also the B'china Seir. What is the implication of these words? They say they have Oymas B'Yav, we have Bri Yetzer Asir, the lower world. And in the lower worlds there are all kinds of creatures. Numerous creatures. Actually, cannot be accounted for. And we say all of these creatures are identifiable at the higher level in the higher world. Why? What compels you to say that? The answer is just these 4 words. Mipnei shehu gamkin b'china soira. Because that world is also b'china soira, is also in the realm of world. What does that tell you? It seems to be saying that world by definition contains all the various varieties that we see in the world. All the various varieties of creation, of the creation that exists in the world is not an anomaly. It's not an error. Anomaly means basically it doesn't belong there, but we put it in there. If it's a world, it has all the variations that world can represent. Smile, Yitzchok.
Yeah.
I could see it. It contains all the variations that world can have. Except there is a higher level and a lower level. But if it is world, it has all the variations. Let's step away from this for a moment and focus into that. Why does it have to have all the variations? Why can't our world exist without a rat? Why must it have rats? They're a nuisance.
It wouldn't express needs, no?
This is not a guessing game.
I thought you were asking. No.
Let's think before we answer. I'll let you answer, but let's think first. What does it mean? All the variations, because it's a world, all the variations are there. And I'm pointing out the extreme question from our perspective. This is something which is very broad, you obviously can see. But as everything, you want to have a little bit of a handle on it, a little bit of sense. What is this about? What is this about? And we'll go back to an extremely simple base that we discuss all the time. The first principle that I'd like that we should somehow relate to, it's a pretty big, deep principle, but at this point it will be time for us to understand it. Again, we're going to go off track a little bit, and I'm hoping we can come back and restore it and so forth. In our physical world, there is no reality without a full structure of many details. What does that mean? You build a house, you don't build a house. Build a wall, and a wall, and a wall, and a wall, and a floor, and a roof. You don't build a house. You can't build a house. You build all kinds of different pieces, and that results in a house. The house is almost an inadvertent result of all your effort. Practically speaking. But we have to understand that this is true only at our level. God does not create what's called monodimensional creatures. Monodimensional, everybody know what that means? Monodimensional. Single dimension. No, it's non-entities. Monodimensional cannot exist. Rebbe doesn't create material for something. Rebbe creates a reality. Please understand. Because what our experience is that we create, that we build things in a monodimensional fashion. We have to build a house, we have to build a wall, and another wall, and another wall, another wall. And the house is first projected in our mind. In practice, there is nothing of the house. Until it's all finished, oh yeah, it looks like a house. And then still we break it out in how many walls it has. Because of this phenomenon, our experience in the world, we went that far, and we started saying, you know, the human being also consists of single dimensions, of little pieces, and little signals from this part and that part, and together they form something that looks like a human being, but it's not a real human being. So, we have to understand the truth. The human being is a godly creation in its totality. God created the human being as a full-fledged creature, as a human being. And he has a godly neshama, which is a truth in and of itself. And anything that is a truth in and of itself contains everything that is significant to be within this encompassment. It belongs there. That was complemented.
So what's that last step there? Anything that is true in and of itself contains within it what's
Like we said many times. This is not, we are still going on. Just step by step. You enter this room. The room is completely empty. You would immediately recognize that this room is empty. No, but it beckons to be populated with a table, with a chair, and whatever else fits into this. Not because you need to sit down, but because the room itself represents that element. It's a dining room by concept. And therefore, on a conceptual level, it already contains all of these things. Which means that all the things that eventually end up to be in this room they don't end up to be in this room as an afterthought. It's being created at some point in time. They were created at the moment when the room was conceptualized. And only later they surface. So that if you take all the furnishings out of this room will not lose its definition that it is a dining room. But how can you dine without a dining room table? It's a dining room. That's what it's designed, that's what seems to be containing, the idea that it contains a dining room. And that the idea of a dining room contains every piece of furniture that you can possibly fit into there that will complement in from a dining room. Inherently. Taking this as a so to speak, as a handle, a wholesome world, a God-created world, not a world that evolved from some kind of a lack of being, but a world that represents a godly creation. That world contains everything that fits into a world. Therefore, in the highest world, all the creatures that surface later on in the lowest world, everything, all the ideas and so forth, were all contained there. Except clearly on a much higher level. I'm saying on a conceptual level.
So, what is it about world that contains?
Good question. What is it about the world?
What was the question?
What is it about world that it would contain all kinds of different things? World means the godly reality on a structured level. let's put it directly. We speak many times, everybody knows by now, that a table is not only a human concept, but a table is originating in human neshama. It's defined by his neshama. In the human world, there is definitely, therefore, going to be a table. But that table is not the same as the one that is contained in his neshama. Just a conceptual table. But all the details that go into making that table stand and serve the human being, this is what's going to be contained in that room. This is what world. World means you're representing something which is much higher than world, like neshama, life. But where are you, on what level are you representing it? On the worldly level, which means it's a structure that's put together from many, many minute, insignificant, quote-unquote, details. And this is what's represented by all these various creatures.
The Marshall Rama.
The fact that if you leave wood in a moist area, the best wood, eventually the wood will rot. Everyone knows that wood rotting is as a result of attacks from various micro creatures. You can take a look at a piece of wood, it looks precious, you open it up, it just falls apart. Because these creatures got into it, they ate it up, and there's nothing left of its strength, so to speak. Just to give you an idea, even though I don't want to, this is not the basis of what I'm saying. If there were no such thing as wood rotting,
What?
there were no such thing as these microbes who eat up the wood, and wood would not rot. What's that?
941.
Okay. If there were no such thing, this world couldn't exist. The world has to provide for its own recycling. Because that's what world is. Just as on a daily basis, you go to sleep and wake up fresh. Why can't you continue on? Poof. An endless cycle. Okay, enough. Just one point, I explained these words. Seeing that this is a world, therefore it contains everything. Everything else makes up the word. And now we're going to double line. Akiva. Thank you, Akiva. You just spared me.